Bristle brushes take full advantage of your digital drawing tablet, not just the direction you're moving, but also the pressure sensitivity and even the tilt of the pen as you're holding it. If you look in your brushes palette, the Bristle brushes are the ones that have a little icon preview on the left-hand side, and also they give you a number of the size of them. If you select one of these and start testing it out, you can see, grab my brush tool, you can see that it will change based on the direction and the amount of pressure that I'm holding down on my pen. When I let go, it fully vectorizes it. These are really, really cool because they try to mimic other real-world style brushes. So if I create a new bristle brush, we'll go down to New, choose Bristle Brush. One thing to keep in mind is that bristle brushes don't require you to have any pre-existing objects or artwork. You can make them completely from scratch. We'll say OK. These are the options that are brought up. The first thing to choose is the shape. And remember, like I said, these try to mimic real-world painting brushes. So you've got ones that are blunt, that are pointed, some that are fanned or maybe curved. Each one kind of mimics the way a watercolor or an acrylic or an oil painting brush tends to work. So if I chose, say, a blunt edge, you get a preview of what it looks like. You can set the size, the density or the bristle length of it, also the thickness of it, how dense or fine or coarse it is. The opacity is very important. The more translucent it is, the more watercolor it'll tend to look. But the more opaque it is, it'll tend to look more like an oil or an acrylic type paintbrush. And then finally, the stiffness of it tends to show how loose or rigid your lines tend to be. As with the other ones, I like to just kind of create a default brush, we'll say OK to it, and then start practice painting a few lines with it. So that's what that one looks like. Once I've painted a practice line, double click on that brush. Now I can turn on my preview and start to fully customize and see what it looks like, changing not only the size of it, but also how the bristle length will change up the look and feel of it. The bristle density, whether I want it to be very, very dense or not too dense, thicker or coarser, and even the opacity. I like to keep mine a little bit transparent, and the stiffness will make it more or less detailed. The more rigid it is, the more detailed it can be. The more flexible it is, obviously you can see it becomes very, very loose from here. We'll say OK to that. I'll call this Ben's Bristle Brush. And we'll apply it to that stroke. Now I can start painting with it. For this exercise, I'm going to give you a different way of thinking about painting. Now, if I chose a regular brush and I started to paint, all of my brush strokes are going to be on top of whatever I'm painting with. What I've done is I've gone ahead and drawn the outline of this apple and also the little apple stem. What I want to do is to paint inside of the apple, and I want to pick up on some of these textures. So we're going to be changing the color that I have. To paint inside of an object, however, this is what's really cool and unique. I'm going to go ahead and select the red area of the outline of my apple. Look at the very, very bottom of your toolbox. You've got 3 different little icons. By default, the Draw Normal allows you to draw on top of whatever you have selected. The second one is to draw behind. So any marks that I make with it selected, when I start to paint, grab my brush, will be drawn behind the brush that I have. Let's change the color of it so we can see it. So now you can see the drawing is going behind the object that I have. The other object, or painting mode, allows me to draw inside of whatever object I have selected. So with my apple selected, we'll choose Draw Inside. Now, whenever I choose a stroke color, I'll deselect this. Let's pick up some yellow, and when I start to make my brush strokes, even if I go outside of it, it's staying inside of my brush area. Let's make my brush a little bit bigger. Instead of 1 point, now we can make them a lot bigger. And all I'm doing is painting inside of this area. And I don't have to worry about going outside of the edges simply because I'm working on the inside mode. This is where you would make a variety of different brushes and then play around with how they look, changing up the stroke, size, and even how they react. What I want you to do is to repaint this apple. Once you're finished, you can deselect it by choosing your selection tool and double-clicking off, and it will take you back into regular drawing mode.